Happy 11/11. Or here in America, it's known as Veterans Day. It's a time to recognize and honor all those who have served in our armed forces. And I'm personally very grateful for this nation and all those who have given their life or sacrificed or committed their life for the sake of freedom. Because although I was born in America, that probably would not have happened had not the United States intervened in my parents' homeland of Korea. They lived there during the 1940s and 50s, and communist forces in North Korea and China were trying to take over. And thankfully, uh, the military intervened and pushed them back, and now it enabled South Korea to become a free and democratic republic. And after the war, considered one of the poorest countries in the world, but now, uh, 70 years later, it's considered one of the most prosperous nations in the world, probably a top 15 economy. And interestingly, it's also one of the top mission sending countries in the world per capita. So God has really blessed that nation, and much of that blessing had come through the intervention of the United States. And so I am personally very thankful for those who have served. And also, this is a good time to bless and honor those who are currently serving and praying for them, their protection, for their families, for their blessing and prosperity. And there are many different celebrations going on here in America. Obviously, it's a national holiday, so schools and businesses, many of them, take this day off to observe it. But uh, in our nation, uh, they also have a ceremony at Arlington at the tomb of the unknown soldier. So, however you want to connect with this day, to celebrate this day, and just ask the Lord, what is one way for you to honor and be grateful, thankful for this time and for those who give their lives for freedom? Because that mentality, that spirit is really from the Lord. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. And it's for freedom's sake that Christ has set us free. And obviously, we're in a world where there's still so much conflict and chaos and war. Even our own government has changed the name of Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth to Secretary of War, which interestingly, it used to be called the Department of War and the Secretary of War, but then that changed after, I believe, World War II. And the idea being that we're not so much about war, but we're about defense, which seems a little bit better in the global sense, where we're not trying to take over countries. We're just trying to defend liberty and the interests of this country. But there is this reversion back to this idea of war, which some would argue may be a good thing, others maybe not. Whichever perspective you fall on, the idea is that nations are battling against one another. And thankfully, the United States, for the most part, is centered, founded on this value of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and values that are somewhat kingdom oriented. Uh, Obviously, the expression, the manifestation of those values have not always been perfectly played out in our nation's history. And so, but it speaks to this idea that, you know, the kingdom of God is righteousness, peace, and joy, and it's forcefully advancing. And the increase of God's government knows no end. And he raises up people and nations to try and manifest these purposes, to advance these purposes. But ultimately, it is meant to come through his church. And it's interesting. Veterans Day wasn't always called Veterans Day. It was originally called Armistice Day. And Armistice Day was the celebration of the ending of World War I at the 11th hour on the 11th day of the 11th month. And so eventually it got changed to Veterans Day after, I believe, the Korean War. And But what this speaks to is this idea that armistice actually means a stopping or a ceasing of arms or weapons. It's laying down weapons for battle. And this harkens back to a prophecy in Isaiah 2, where Isaiah says, it will come about in the last days that the mountain of the house of the Lord will be established as the chief of the mountains, and will be raised above the hills, and all the nations will stream to it. And many peoples will come and say, Come, let's go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, so that he may teach us about his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. For the law will go out from Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And he will judge between the nations and will meditate or mediate for many peoples, and they will beat their swords into plowshares and their pruning knives. Uh, Nation will not lift up sword against nation, and never again will they learn war. What an amazing prophecy. And I believe that we are in the season moving closer and closer to that, where I'm declaring and praying that not we won't have a secretary of war anymore or even a secretary of defense, but we will have a secretary, a department of peace, because Yeshua is the Prince of Peace and the Lord of Lords and the King of Kings. And this mountain of the Lord that Isaiah is referring to is not so much this nation of Israel or the city of Jerusalem. It really is the mountain of his church, the bride. It's Acts 15:16 that in the last days he will raise up the tabernacle, the fallen tent of David, and uh, it will help bring in the full restoration of the Gentiles into the kingdom. And this is also Isaiah 60, to arise and shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has come upon you, and nations will come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your dawning. So, what they're referring to is the city of God, this light upon a hill, and it's the bride of Christ, this glorious bride that will be lifted up on the mountain of God, the tabernacle of David, and where it will manifest true wisdom, true knowledge, true peace, true understanding, that it will not come about through warfare, through uh, earthly powers, but the weapons that we have are spiritual for taking down strongholds. And so this is the prophecy of the Lord. And again, these things cannot be understood through the carnal mind. 1 Corinthians 2. These spiritual revelations and mysteries can only be understood through the Spirit. But I think today is a great day to begin asking the Lord about what his desire is for the nations. What is his will for humanity? And I believe that this prophecy is coming to pass in our time, that we are pushing more towards peace. There's a greater consciousness towards peace as we connect with the Spirit of the Lord, that we realize war is not a good means to bring about peace. Obviously, it has helped in certain regards where people who value freedom and liberty and democracy intervene and fight those who would oppress and control. And we have seen the fruit of those types of interventions and conflicts. But for the most part, there is coming a time where war will not be necessary. Even Yeshua, there's a prophecy about that the wolf will lay down with the lamb, and that the idea that even animals will be at peace with one another. And so talk with the Lord about this and ask how you can partner to bring about this type of government shift. That some trust in horses and some trust in chariots, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. It is the Lord Himself who will accomplish these things through His church, as the church abides in Him and the Lord abides in them. And that glory will begin to manifest, and the sons of God will be led by the Spirit of God to help usher in this type of kingdom. And there will be a different type of veteran, not one who fights with earthly arms, with earthly weapons, guns and missiles and tanks and all these things, but with spiritual power. Remember, the kingdom is not a matter of talk, but of power. And this power that comes from the Lord is resident within every believer. It's inherent within the church. It's the inheritance of the sons of God and the gift to the bride of Christ to release peace upon this earth. And so, bless you to connect with the Lord and to honor veterans, to honor those who have laid down their life for freedom's sake, but also to commit yourself to be one who will also, in love, lay down your life for the sake of freedom.